This is impossible. Looks like something a kid would doodle with a toy pen. That's how it started. One sentence thrown across a boardroom like a knife cutting straight through the air, cutting straight through me. I had stood there in my pressed suit tie, knotted too tight, palms sweating on the clicker as the lights dimmed over my design, the most ambitious thing I had ever dreamed. And she, the almighty CEO, didn't see innovation, didn't see the years of schooling or the sleepless nights. She only saw me, someone she thought didn't belong. I remember the way people shifted in their chairs, the way the room froze when she tilted her head at me with that practiced smirk. Ethan Cole, is it? You're young. Ambitious, maybe. But let's be real, you're out of your depth. My jaw clenched, but I kept my voice steady. Ma'am, the design is structurally sound. It's more stable in high winds than any box tower in Manhattan. She waved her hand like swatting away a mosquito. I didn't ask for fairy tales. I asked for excellence. What you've brought me is amateur hour dressed up with pretty curves. Then lowering her tone so the words burned just for me. Stick to community centers, Mr. Cole. Leave the skyscrapers to people who know what they're doing. You want to know what silence feels like. It's when every eye avoids yours, when colleagues look at the table ashamed for you, but too scared to speak. I gathered my papers, nodded politely. But inside, I was on fire. The next morning, the firm got her letter and ultimatum. She laid out 4 demands, so absurd, so cruel, it was basically a setup to fail. Net zero emissions, a 40% increase in property value, finished under budget, and groundbreaking in 3 months. Everyone said the same thing: impossible. That word kept echoing off the walls, bouncing around the conference room until it landed in my chest. She didn't just want me off the project, she wanted my career buried under her impossible challenge. I sat there staring at her letter and thought about my grandmother. She used to scrub offices like this night after night, invisible to everyone who walked on her polished floors. She once told me, buildings have souls, Ethan, and the soul comes from the dreamer, not the owner. She never lived to see me graduate MIT. She never saw me win my first award. But she believed, and I wasn't about to let some CEO's prejudice erase that. So when the team muttered about quitting, about updating their resumes, I stood up and said, "We can do this. We'll meet every ridiculous condition she's thrown at us." They looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. And how exactly, my boss asked. I grabbed a marker and scrawled across the whiteboard, "Impossible equals I'm possible." Then I turned and said, "That's how." I worked like a man possessed. My tiny apartment turned into a war room, blueprints plastered across the walls, equations running down yellow pads, coffee cups stacked like trophies. I reached out to old professors in Germany, engineers in Tokyo, anyone who still remembered my name. One call changed everything. A mentor told me about transparent graphene solar panels, stronger than steel, almost invisible, capable of turning the whole skin of a building into a power plant. My heart pounded. Suddenly, the spiral design she mocked wasn't just art, it was a generator. It could power itself and sell energy back to the grid. The fantasy was about to become profit. Night bled into day. I barely ate. My neighbor started knocking on my door, dropping off food with that worried look. I'd smile, thank her, but my head was already back in the numbers. I wasn't building a tower anymore. I was building revenge. Presentation day came like a trial. They didn't want me in the room, so my colleague Daniel stood in front of the CEO with me, whispering answers through a hidden earpiece from a cafe down the street. My hands shook as I listened to her questions. She was sharp like a hawk circling prey. "Explain to me load distribution during a hurricane," she demanded. I whispered. He repeated. "Compression rings at every level, redirecting wind pressure, making the tower more stable than rectangular builds." She narrowed her eyes. Again she tested again. I fed him answers. Numbers, schematics, logic, everything I had bled for in the dark hours of the night. And then came the moment. Robert, her oldest board member, punched numbers into his tablet, looked up and said, "Victoria, if these projections hold, this would be the most valuable property in the city. 55% increase minimum." The room stirred. Even she couldn't hide the flicker in her eyes. But pride, that was her prison. She slammed her folder shut and hissed, "I asked you to keep him away, and now you've deceived me. 24 hours. Either tell me the truth about who designed this, or you'll never work in this city again." 24 hours. That's how long I had to decide whether to hide forever or step into the fire. Weeks later, the tower began to rise anyway. Money talks louder than pride, and the board had voted to proceed. They called it the Impossible Building, half as a joke, half in awe. Steel modules snapped into place like Lego bricks. We were ahead of schedule under budget, drawing crowds every day. That's when she showed up, hard hat, perched on perfect hair heels, clicking across gravel like gunshots. She spotted me immediately. "What is he doing on my site?" she barked. Workers froze. The site went quiet except for the hum of machines. She stormed up, face flushed with fury. "You were banned. In writing. You deceived me, humiliated me in front of my own board." I took a breath, handed my tablet to the foreman, and looked her straight in the eye. "You're right. I did design it. Every detail, every calculation. And you know what? The solar panels generating $2 million in revenue a year, mine. The water reclamation saving you $600,000 annually, mine. The modular construction putting us weeks ahead of schedule and millions under budget. That's me. You wanted the impossible. Well, here it is, standing in steel and glass." For the first time, she didn't have a quick retort. Her voice wavered. "Security, remove him." No one moved. The foreman cleared his throat. "Ma'am, with respect, if he leaves, we can't keep building. He's the only one who knows how all the systems fit together." Her son stepped forward then. "Mother, stop. The pre-sales are through the roof. The city wants this as their environmental crown jewel. Investors are lining up. Don't burn this down because of pride." I added softly, "This isn't about the building anymore, is it? You saw me and made up your mind before I even spoke. And now you're furious, not because the design failed, but because you were wrong." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The silence was heavier than any steel beam on that site. And then she turned and walked away, muttering only, "Continue. But I'll be watching." When the helix finally rose, curling into the Manhattan sky like a spiral of light, the world took notice. The Wall Street Journal called it the most important building since the elevator. Kids on field trips pointed up and said, "It looks like it's dancing." I gave tours on Saturdays showing them how the building breathed, how it cleaned air, how it generated power. And somewhere between headlines and applause, the woman who once mocked me asked for dinner. Not to negotiate, not to boast, but to apologize. I didn't need her apology. The building already said everything. But I accepted anyway, because sometimes the bigger victory is watching your enemy transform. Opening night, the plaza glowed golden as the sun hit those panels. The crowd gasped. Reporters shoved microphones and I stepped on stage. I looked out at faces, at kids clutching sketch pads, at skeptics now believers. And I said, 2 years ago, I was told this was impossible. Tonight we proved the only real limit is imagination. The applause thundered. Cameras flashed. And somewhere in the front row, that CEO, once my biggest critic, stood clapping not with condescension, but with pride. She offered me a top position in her company. I turned it down. Instead, I started my own firm, built on the idea that impossible is just where innovation begins. But I told her I'd be honored to take you on as my first client. She smiled genuinely this time and shook my hand. Partners, not adversaries. Now the helix stands as a beacon. But more than that, it stands as proof. Proof that brilliance has no color, that innovation has no age, and that impossible is just fear dressed up as logic. So I want to ask you, how many Ethan Coles out there never get their chance? How many ideas are killed because someone in power decides they don't fit the image? Do you think society has really learned to judge talent fairly, or are we still letting prejudice decide what's possible? Tell me in the comments, because your answers, your stories, they matter. And maybe the next impossible thing will start with you.